At 8:07 on a cold Monday morning, Emily Parker found a velvet ring box inside Damian Blackwood's therapy room, and beside it lay a handwritten note bearing her name. She did not touch either object, because the message underneath was enough to stop her breath. If you stay until his final evaluation, he will ask you to remain for reasons neither of you is ready to admit. The handwriting belonged to no one she recognized, yet the writer knew the exact date of Damian's medical review, knew her work schedule, and knew that she had secretly applied for guardianship of her late cousin's daughter. Before Emily could decide whether the note was a warning, a threat, or a cruel joke, Damian entered without his cane, saw the box, and went still. He closed the door behind him with unusual care, then asked, "Who gave that to you?" Somewhere beyond the windows, waves struck the cliffs with enough force to make the old glass tremble inside its frame. Emily had worked at the Blackwood estate for 6 months, supervising Damian's recovery after the collision that nearly ended both his mobility and his career. He was one of New England's most influential real estate investors, but inside the mansion overlooking the Atlantic, power mattered less than whether he could cross a room without pain. Emily knew the exact rhythm of his medication, the subtle difference between fatigue and pride, and the silence he used when he feared becoming dependent. She also knew enough about wealthy households to recognize when an object had been staged. The velvet box was positioned too neatly, the note used information available only to staff, and Damian's reaction carried recognition rather than surprise. "I found it exactly like this," she said. "If you know who wrote it, tell me now." Damian opened the box and revealed not a diamond, but a Blackwood family signet ring engraved with a date from 23 years earlier. His expression hardened, then softened into something Emily had never seen before. He explained that the ring had belonged to his mother and disappeared after her death. During the same week, his father dismissed half the household staff without explanation. Only 3 people knew the ring existed: Damian, his older sister Claire, and Daniel Brooks, the estate's longtime operations director. The note, however, contained information none of them should have known about Emily's guardianship petition. "Someone searched your background," Damian said, "and someone wants you frightened enough to leave before Friday." Friday was the day Damian's board would vote on whether he could return as chief executive or remain under medical leave. If he failed the evaluation, Daniel would continue controlling the company's day-to-day decisions, including the sale of a coastal rehabilitation center Damian had promised to preserve. Emily had no reason to care about board politics, except the center provided therapy to working families who could never afford Damian's private treatment. She had watched her own aunt spend years choosing between rent and medical bills, and she understood what the sale would cost people who would never enter the Blackwood mansion. "Then we call the police," she said. Damian shook his head because the note contained no direct threat, and reporting the ring would alert whoever planted it that their plan had worked. Their first disagreement arrived before either of them admitted they had become more than employer and caregiver. Emily wanted to leave the estate immediately, not because she feared the message, but because staying could endanger the guardianship review she had spent months preparing. Damian told her he would support whatever decision protected her family, yet the restraint in his voice revealed how much the possibility of losing her affected him. She refused his offer to contact the family court or use his attorneys, because influence could damage her case as easily as it could help. "I need my life to remain mine," she said. Damian accepted the boundary without argument, though his eyes lingered on the note. "Then let me help without owning the solution." Emily photographed the note and ring, sealed both inside separate evidence bags, and reviewed the security log with Daniel. The cameras outside the therapy room had lost power for 11 minutes before her arrival, supposedly because of routine electrical testing. Daniel appeared genuinely disturbed, yet he explained that only Damian, Claire, and senior operations staff possessed access to the corridor. When Emily asked who scheduled the testing, Daniel checked the system and found authorization under Damian's own credentials. Damian had been asleep under monitored medication at that time, making the approval either forged or entered by someone with access to his private account. Before they could inspect further, Emily's phone vibrated with a message from Nathan, her cousin. "Call me now. Someone contacted the court and claimed you are having an affair with your employer. Emily stepped into the empty conservatory and returned Nathan's call, while rain struck the glass roof with growing force. The guardianship officer had received an anonymous statement alleging that Emily planned to move her niece into Damian's estate and had concealed a personal relationship, creating financial dependence. None of it was true, yet family courts investigated instability, not just criminal behavior, and a wealthy employer could look like either security or control depending on who framed the story. Nathan had already been asked whether Emily's work arrangement included housing, gifts, or private benefits. She answered every question through clenched calm, then promised she would attend the court interview scheduled for Wednesday morning. When she ended the call, Damian was waiting beyond the doorway, far enough away to respect privacy, but close enough to see the damage on her face. She told him everything because secrecy now served the person attacking them. Damian's first instinct was to identify the caller, but Emily stopped him before power turned into interference. Instead, they agreed on a narrower plan. Daniel would preserve security records, Damian would disclose the planted ring to independent counsel, and Emily would document every aspect of her employment before the court could be manipulated further. She also decided to stay through Friday, not for Damian, but because leaving under pressure would make the accusation appear credible. "You should know," she said, "that staying does not mean I trust everyone here." Damian answered, "It should not." That afternoon, Claire arrived unexpectedly from New York, wearing a camel coat still damp from the storm and carrying the impatience of someone accustomed to arriving after decisions had already been made. She embraced Damian carefully, greeted Emily with polite warmth, then demanded to see the ring. Her composure broke when she recognized the engraving. Claire explained that their mother had given the ring to a former nurse named Evelyn before her death, asking her to keep it until Damian learned the difference between loyalty and possession. Evelyn disappeared after the funeral, and the family assumed she had taken the ring for money. "Our father called her a thief," Claire said. "I believed him, because believing him was easier than asking why mother trusted a nurse more than us." The revelation changed the meaning of the note. Whoever planted the ring might not be threatening Damian at all. They might be forcing him to confront something his family had buried. Emily asked why the note mentioned her, and Claire admitted that Evelyn had contacted her 2 months earlier after seeing an article about Damian's accident. She claimed to possess documents proving the rehabilitation center belonged to a charitable trust, which meant the board had no legal authority to sell it. Claire dismissed the message as extortion and never told Damian, partly because Daniel warned that reopening old estate records could destabilize the company before his evaluation. Damian's anger remained controlled, but Emily recognized betrayal in the way he lowered his voice. "You decided what truth I could survive," he said. Daniel entered during the confrontation and did not deny advising Claire. He argued that Evelyn had a history of emotional instability and that protecting Damian's recovery required eliminating distractions. Emily watched his wording carefully because it mirrored the anonymous complaint against her, both treating care as permission to control information. Daniel then produced emails suggesting Evelyn had demanded money in exchange for the documents. Claire insisted she had deleted the originals after forwarding them to him. The metadata on Daniel's copies, however, showed they had been exported through the same administrative system used to authorize the camera outage. Before anyone could challenge him, Daniel calmly explained that the operations server handled thousands of estate files and that shared metadata proved nothing. His answer was plausible enough to prevent accusation, but too polished to restore trust. Damian ordered an outside cybersecurity firm to image every server before Friday, removing Daniel's authority over records until the review concluded. Daniel accepted the decision without visible resistance, then looked toward Emily with an expression she could not read. "Be careful," he said quietly as he left. "People often mistake being chosen for being safe." That evening, Emily drove to Boston for the guardianship interview and noticed a black sedan following her through 3 consecutive turns. She changed lanes, exited early, and called Nathan on speaker while keeping the courthouse security number ready. The sedan remained behind her until she entered a well-lit police station parking lot, where it paused across the street before disappearing into traffic. Emily photographed the license plate, but the image blurred beneath the rain. When she reached home, an envelope waited beneath her apartment door. Inside was a photograph of Damian watching her and Nathan through a restaurant window, taken weeks earlier, with one sentence written across the back. "Ask him why he already believed you belonged to someone else." The photograph unsettled Emily more than the anonymous accusation, because it revealed a private weakness Damian had never admitted. She remembered the weeks when he became distant after seeing her with Nathan, the formal tone, the canceled conversations, and the invisible wall that appeared without explanation. Until that moment, she had interpreted his behavior as caution, yet the photograph suggested jealousy had shaped decisions affecting her workplace. She called Damian and asked one direct question. "Did you treat me differently because you thought Nathan was my boyfriend?" Silence answered before he did. When he finally said yes, Emily felt less betrayed by the feeling than by the punishment hidden inside his restraint. Damian did not defend himself. He admitted seeing them together, assuming the relationship was romantic, and withdrawing because he feared crossing a professional line. Emily told him distance could still become manipulation when another person was forced to absorb its consequences without knowing why. "You made me search for a mistake I never made," she said. Damian's apology came immediately, but she refused to let remorse end the conversation. If they were going to survive the week, honesty had to replace the careful silence both of them once considered respectful. She told him Nathan was her cousin and the legal guardian applicant for his late sister's daughter. Damian answered, "I should have asked, and I did not, because certainty felt safer than vulnerability." Wednesday's court interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Emily disclosed the anonymous complaint, her employment records, Damian's condition, and the fact that someone appeared to be following her. The guardianship officer did not accuse her, yet she postponed the final recommendation until the allegations could be investigated. Nathan remained supportive, but the delay meant his niece would spend another month in temporary care. Outside the courthouse, Emily found Damian waiting across the street beside his driver, clearly resisting the instinct to approach until she invited him. He had brought no attorney and offered no influence, only a copy of the estate's formal statement, confirming she received no gifts, housing, or financial benefits beyond salary. As they walked toward the parking garage, a woman in her late 60s stepped from behind a concrete pillar and called Damian by the childhood name no employee used. Evelyn looked tired but composed, with silver hair pulled into a low knot and a medical bracelet circling one wrist. She told them she had sent the first note and planted the ring, but denied the court complaint, the surveillance, or the photograph. Her purpose had been to force Damian to examine the trust documents before the board vote because every formal request had been intercepted. She apologized to Emily for using private information, explaining that she learned about the guardianship through public court filings and believed Emily would understand why the rehabilitation center mattered. Damian asked why Evelyn disappeared after his mother's death. She handed him a sealed letter written in his mother's handwriting, then explained that his father threatened to prosecute her for theft if she revealed the trust. Daniel, then a junior estate attorney, arranged a settlement requiring silence and convinced her that protecting Damian meant leaving. Over the years, she watched the rehabilitation center drift into Blackwood corporate control while the original charitable restrictions vanished from official records. Recently, after discovering the proposed sale, she contacted Claire, but every response came through Daniel. "I planted the ring because I needed you to recognize the lie before they erased the last proof," she said. The letter described a trust funded by Damian's mother and required the center to remain non-profit unless a majority of patient families approved any sale. It also named Daniel as temporary custodian until Damian turned 35, a deadline that had passed 4 years earlier. If genuine, the document exposed not only an illegal transaction, but nearly a decade of concealed authority. Damian wanted to confront Daniel immediately, yet Emily noticed Evelyn gripping the railing whenever footsteps approached. Fear had shaped her life too long to be dismissed as caution. They moved the conversation to an attorney's office and arranged forensic verification before alerting anyone. The document specialist confirmed the paper, ink, and signature were consistent with records from the year of Damian's mother's death. But one problem remained. The letter referenced an attached trust schedule Evelyn did not possess. Without it, Daniel could argue the instructions were personal wishes rather than enforceable terms. Evelyn believed the schedule had been stored inside a brass medication chest from the old household infirmary. The chest had disappeared during renovations and was now listed among items transferred to the rehabilitation center's archive. Before Damian could send someone to retrieve it, his phone rang from the center. A late-night electrical fire had started inside the archive room, triggering sprinklers and destroying several storage cabinets. No one was injured, but the brass chest could not be located. Emily looked at the timing, the missing attachment, and the photograph meant to fracture trust between them. "This was never about jealousy," she said. "Someone used your jealousy because it was the easiest way to keep us from comparing what we knew." By Thursday morning, the fire marshal had classified the archive blaze as suspicious because the suppression system activated 8 minutes later than designed. Damian postponed his medical evaluation and demanded that the board delay its vote, but Daniel argued that instability surrounding the estate made immediate leadership transition more necessary, not less. Several directors agreed, especially after anonymous financial reports suggested Damian's rehabilitation had impaired his judgment. The narrative was tightening around him exactly as the guardianship complaint tightened around Emily. Carelessness was being presented as incapacity, and emotional attachment was being presented as corruption. If Damian reacted with anger, Daniel would call him unstable. If he remained silent, the sale would proceed. Emily suggested they stop defending themselves separately. She created a single timeline connecting the ring, camera outage, intercepted emails, court complaint, surveillance photograph, forged authorization, and archive fire. The sequence revealed a clear escalation whenever someone moved closer to the trust documents. Claire contributed her original phone backups, which showed Evelyn's first message had arrived without any demand for money. Daniel's forwarded emails included altered lines and missing headers, meaning someone had manufactured extortion language after receiving them. The outside cybersecurity team also discovered that Daniel's administrative account exported Emily's personnel file 2 days before the anonymous complaint reached family court. The evidence established misconduct, but did not yet prove Daniel caused the fire or controlled the sedan. Damian faced a difficult choice: expose enough at the board meeting to stop the sale, risking destruction of remaining evidence, or remain quiet until investigators built a stronger case, allowing the center to be transferred beyond recovery. Emily reminded him that leadership sometimes required acting before certainty became comfortable. He answered that the people at the center should not pay for his need to build a perfect case. Together, they prepared a disclosure focused on verifiable records rather than accusation. Minutes before the board meeting, Nathan called Emily from the temporary care residence. Her niece had received a package containing a photograph of Emily entering Damian's mansion, along with a note asking whether she wanted to live with the rich man who bought her aunt. The child was frightened and believed she had caused the guardianship delay. Emily's composure broke for the first time, because whoever orchestrated the pressure had crossed from reputation into a grieving child's sense of safety. Damian offered to cancel the meeting and go with her, but Emily refused. "Stop the sale," she said. "I will protect my family, and you will protect the families depending on that center." At the residence, Emily found her niece sitting beside Nathan with the photograph folded into a tiny square. She explained that adults sometimes used lies when truth no longer served them, and none of the delay belonged to the child. Nathan had preserved the packaging, which carried a courier tracking number. The sender had paid through a corporate account belonging to Blackwood Estate Services. Emily recognized the company as one Daniel supervised directly. She forwarded the evidence to Damian and the police, then asked Nathan to bring the child to the courthouse's protected family area until the threat was assessed. Inside the boardroom, Damian disclosed the authentic letter, altered emails, system exports, and the estate services account linked to harassment. Daniel remained composed and claimed every action had been taken to protect the company from Evelyn's manipulation and Emily's growing influence. He admitted investigating Emily but denied contacting the court or sending packages. When Damian asked why his account authorized the camera outage, Daniel produced medical logs showing Damian had taken a sedative known to cause memory gaps. The implication was brutal. Damian might have acted during an impaired episode and forgotten. Emily arrived while directors debated emergency removal. She asked to review the medication logs and immediately found a dosage error. Damian's prescription had been reduced 6 weeks earlier, but Daniel's file used the previous amount, copied from an outdated chart. More importantly, Emily had personally recorded Damian's vital signs during the alleged authorization window, and he had been fully asleep under continuous monitoring. Her handwritten log, time-stamped tablet entry, and nursing backup proved Daniel's medical evidence was fabricated. For the first time, Daniel's control slipped. He accused Emily of creating records after the fact to preserve her relationship with Damian. Damian did not defend their relationship. He asked the board to examine the server signature attached to the forged chart. The cybersecurity director confirmed it originated from Daniel's private office computer. Police entered moments later with a warrant based on the harassment package and personnel file export. Daniel stood slowly, then looked toward Damian with wounded contempt. "Your mother chose strangers over family," he said. "I spent 20 years protecting what she was willing to give away." As officers searched his office, they found the brass medication chest hidden behind a removable wall panel, smoke-stained but intact. Inside lay the missing trust schedule, patient family voting records, and a second letter naming Daniel as custodian, without ownership authority. Daniel had not merely concealed the trust, he had converted charitable assets into corporate leverage while telling himself preservation justified control. The board suspended the sale and Damian's removal vote. Yet before police led Daniel away, he revealed one final fact. Claire had known the chest was hidden for years. Claire did not deny it when Damian confronted her in the empty boardroom. She had discovered the chest after their father's death, but feared the trust would fracture the company and expose Daniel's misconduct, which she believed had initially protected thousands of employees from financial collapse. She moved the chest to the estate, intending to reveal it after Damian returned to full health, but Daniel found it first and pressured her into silence. Claire insisted she never knew about the court complaint, surveillance, or threat to Emily's niece. Her guilt came from delay, not orchestration, yet delay had given Daniel the time he needed to escalate. Damian's anger toward her was quieter than anger toward Daniel, because betrayal from someone loved often carried more grief than rage. Claire asked for forgiveness, but he told her forgiveness could not substitute for accountability. She agreed to surrender her board seat, provide testimony, and fund independent legal representation for the rehabilitation center's patient families. Emily watched the exchange without intervening because reconciliation imposed from outside would become another form of control. The family had to decide what truth required from them, not what image would look merciful. The guardianship investigation changed rapidly once police connected the anonymous complaint to Daniel's office network. The family court cleared Emily of financial misconduct, yet the officers still questioned whether the public scandal surrounding Damian created unnecessary instability for a child already carrying loss. Emily could have minimized their relationship by calling it purely professional, but doing so would repeat the same pattern of hiding truth to satisfy authority. She explained that Damian had developed feelings, mishandled them through distance, apologized without demanding forgiveness, and supported her boundaries even when doing so cost him influence. "Stability does not mean a life without complicated people," she said. "It means a child knows the adults around her will tell the truth and repair harm." Nathan's guardianship was approved with Emily named as secondary guardian, allowing the child to remain within family while sharing responsibility. The decision did not reward romance or wealth. It recognized months of preparation, safe housing, counseling, and consistent care. Damian did not attend the final private hearing because Emily had not invited him, and he understood that restraint was part of the trust they were rebuilding. Instead, he spent the morning at the rehabilitation center meeting patients whose futures had nearly become financial collateral. He listened to anger without defending himself and signed temporary protections preventing any sale before a family vote. The trust schedule required more than preserving the center. It mandated that descendants of the founder could not personally profit from operations, and all future governance had to include patients, clinicians, and community representatives. Damian proposed transferring the property permanently into an independent nonprofit, but several board members warned that doing so would cost the company millions and weaken investor confidence. He answered that money acquired through concealed authority was not an asset worth protecting. The board approved the transfer after public pressure, and the threat of litigation made resistance more expensive than integrity. Emily returned to the estate for Damian's final medical evaluation 3 days later. He completed every walking test without assistance, climbed the terrace steps, and stood through a full balance assessment without reaching for the rail. The physician cleared him to resume ordinary activity, including driving and travel, but advised continued therapy for strength. Emily signed the final report with pride and an unexpected ache because recovery ended the professional reason connecting their lives. Damian noticed her hesitation, but did not ask her to stay. He thanked her, paid every remaining invoice, and provided a recommendation letter without adding a personal message. At the front entrance, Emily found the velvet ring box resting inside a larger evidence envelope. The signet ring had been released after investigators documented it, and Damian wanted Claire to keep it until the siblings decided together what their mother's memory required. He had not turned the object into a romantic symbol, and that choice affected Emily more deeply than a proposal would have. "You once asked whether helping without owning the solution was possible," she said. "I think this is what it looks like." Damian smiled, though sadness remained visible. "Your work here is finished, Emily, and I will not turn gratitude into an obligation." She told him she appreciated the honesty, then walked toward her car, because staying only to soften goodbye would dishonor everything they had learned. Halfway down the stone steps, she stopped and looked back. "My work is finished," she said, "but that does not answer whether I want you in my life." Damian remained completely still, allowing her to define what came next. Emily took out her phone and asked, "Would you have coffee with me Friday, somewhere neither of us is employed?" Friday evening found them at a small harbor cafe where fishermen, students, and exhausted nurses waited in the same line without caring who Damian was. Emily chose the table near the window, paid for her own drink, and told him the first rule of their new relationship was that neither person could punish the other with silence. Damian accepted immediately and added a rule of his own. Assumptions had to become questions before they became decisions. Their conversation did not erase the difficult months behind them, but it gave those months a purpose beyond regret. For the first time, they spoke without a medical schedule, board crisis, or hidden threat shaping every sentence. Damian admitted that dependence after the accident frightened him less than being seen as weak by someone he respected. Emily explained that caring for people had often made others assume she needed less care herself. They recognized the same mistake from opposite directions. He controlled distance to avoid rejection, while she hid exhaustion to avoid becoming a burden. Neither tendency made them cruel, but both could damage love if left unnamed. Their honesty lacked the polished beauty of perfect romance, yet it felt safer because nothing depended on performance. Over the following months, Damian returned to leadership under a restructured board that included independent ethics oversight. Claire testified against Daniel, resigned, and began repairing her relationship with Damian through actions rather than apologies. Evelyn accepted a formal acknowledgement clearing her name and chose a consulting role with the Rehabilitation Center's Historical Trust Committee. Daniel eventually pleaded guilty to fraud, evidence tampering, and harassment. But the story did not reduce him to a monster. His conviction became a warning about how easily protection could become possession when one person believed only he understood what others needed. Emily opened a small caregiving consultancy that helped families manage recovery plans without surrendering autonomy. Damian invested nothing because she refused financial entanglement, but he introduced her to nonprofit leaders only after asking permission. Her niece settled into Nathan's home, began therapy, and slowly stopped checking whether every good day would be taken away. When she eventually met Damian, he brought no extravagant gift, only a children's book about rebuilding a lighthouse after a storm. He sat on the floor while she explained why the keeper should have asked the villagers for help sooner. 1 year after the ring appeared, the rehabilitation center reopened a renovated family wing funded through the Independent Trust. Patient representatives, therapists, and community members stood beside the ribbon while Damian remained several rows back, refusing to make restitution into publicity. Emily found him near the harbor after the ceremony, watching families enter through doors that could no longer be sold by a private board. She told him his mother would have understood the decision. Damian answered that his mother had understood it first. He had merely taken years to stop confusing inheritance with ownership. That evening, Emily brought him to the courthouse where Nathan's guardianship had been finalized. Her family gathered for photographs beneath autumn trees, and Damian waited at the edge until Emily motioned him forward. The gesture mattered because he did not assume belonging, and she did not offer it from guilt. Her niece placed herself between them, held one of their hands in each of hers, and announced that photographs looked better when nobody stood alone. Laughter moved through the family before the camera captured the moment. Later, as the others returned to their cars, Damian asked Emily to walk with him toward the harbor. He did not carry a ring, contract, or speech prepared to make refusal difficult. He told her that loving her had taught him something his mother tried to teach, through the trust. What mattered most could be protected only by giving it freedom. "I do not want a promise you feel required to keep," he said. "I want the truth, even when it changes." Emily answered that the truth had already changed. She had once believed independence meant never needing anyone, just as he once believed love meant preparing for loss before it arrived. Now she understood that freedom and commitment could exist together when both people remained responsible for their own choices. She reached for his hand because she wanted to, not because the story required a grand gesture. "Then here is the truth," she said. "I choose you, but I will never belong to you." Damian closed his fingers gently around hers. "That is the only way I would want to be chosen." They stood beside the water while the last light crossed the Atlantic, carrying no illusion that love would prevent jealousy, fear, or mistakes. What they possessed was more durable than innocence, a shared practice of asking, listening, repairing, and allowing each other to remain whole. Behind them, the rehabilitation center glowed across the harbor, preserved not by one powerful man, but by a community finally given authority over its own future. Emily understood then that the happiest endings were not built when one person rescued another. They were built when two people learned that respect was not the reward love earned after proving itself, but the structure that allowed love to survive.